Well, hey everyone, it's time for Geocache Talk. Whether you're at work, in the car, wherever you are, we hope you enjoy the show. Please give it a like and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play so that you can hear the show on a weekly basis. Big thanks to the Travel Bugs for the music, my patrons, Doug Jones, Joshua and Caleb Slinkard, Tom Brotherman. I saw him on the chat room, by the way. So, Tom, good to hear, good to see you there. Jeff Arbaugh, Deborah Burris, Joshua, the geocaching vlogger, Nick Hubbard, Andrew Tiepkin, Cecilia Perez, Sydney Sawyer, Valena Mahar, Jane Jewell, Memphis Mafia, Craig Michelle, the GeoGear Heads, Zach Fick, the Deadliest Cachers, and they're up your way, Brett. They're up in New York. We got several of them up there. Tim Terrell, Neil Moore, Molly the Geocaching Dog, Dee and David Vickery, Geocaching Adam, another one, Lori Post, Peter Stepanek, the NoCo Geocachers, and our new patrons, Paula Hughes, Ed Shaper, thank you, Ed, Tick Magnet, that's what he goes by, and John Langston, Bricker John. If you would like to become a patron, head on over to patreon.com/geocachetalk for more details. Patrons get path tags, coins, and other geocaching swag during the year, as well as invites to special events only for patrons. Support levels start at as little as $3 a month. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, Jesse is on vacation, on holiday, and Sydney's having computer problems. So we're back to the good old Geocache Talk days of just me and the guest. And so we're just going to carry on, and Sydney may join us or may not if she can get her computer fixed. So, but we'll just jump right into the show. Number 57 for Sunday, July 9th. Is I welcome Brett Rogers to the show. Welcome to Geocache Talk.
How are you?
Good. So glad to have you on. We've been kind of talking about this for a little bit. We finally got us a good time to have you on and to discuss things. So again, so glad to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. I think this will be fun.
Yeah. It's funny. Oh, wait,
Hey.
we may have Sydney on. She's the possibility. Then there she is, as I welcome my co-host, Sydney Sawyer.
Hi.
I jumped backward. We kind of moved past that point, but that's okay. We're glad to have you on because you have found at least the main geocache we're going to talk about tonight, and
That's
possibly some of the others. I don't know if you found the other ones, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. But yeah, so I contacted Brett actually when I was doing the book, which I will again shamelessly plug the book, 201 Geocaches to Find Before You Die, found on Amazon or behind Sydney's head. You can see it back there. She's got a copy of it. And I was going through, and I was telling Brett about this before we started the show, of how this kind of came about. And as I was, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned before too, is why I really enjoyed doing this book, because I just went on strictly whatever the lower Wilson score was, I put it in the book. So I wasn't like, I didn't go off any bias. And what was fascinating about doing that was that some of the caches that I did not, we all don't know all the caches in our, in our state, let alone in the country. And so when I ran across Brett's Bridges and Arches of Central Park, which we're going to talk about tonight, I was just so fascinated by this cache that I thought I'm gonna send him a note. So I sent Brett a note, and that's when the process kind of began of us talking about having Brett on the show. So again, thanks for being on, and we're going to talk about this cache in a minute, and it's in the book, by the way. There it is with the coin, and Sydney has the coin. We'll look at that in a minute too. But
I won't.
Oh, there it is. Yep. Keep it. We're going to talk about.
Okay.
We're going to start with just geocaches in New York City, because how do you geocache in New York City, Brett?
Carefully. It's a little different. So I was my brother is lives in Alaska and Hawaii, and he introduced me to the game. And in most places that are more Pacific Northwesty or whatever, the game is much more built around the outdoors and finding places that most other people aren't going to. But in New York, there's a million people going every place. So caching here tends to be a lot more reliant on stealth. It's a lot more muggle awareness. It's a lot more just being really careful that what you're doing isn't arousing suspicion. You're almost always, in an area that's got a lot of other people around. So you just have to be cognizant of that. And the hides and the fines, both I think are sensitive to those issues. So.
Yeah. We're I think most people that will listen to the show at one point or time probably have geocached in some size city. But of course, nothing on the magnitude of New York City. But I think that if you have any kind of experience as as a geocacher, and then for those that are new, this is good information for you. But something that Susan and I will do is we just look like we're supposed to be there, or we're supposed to be walking over to a strange, we're supposed to be looking under this park bench because that's what we do. We just look under park benches, instead of kind of looking around like you're kind of trying to be too stealthy. It's like, whoa, is somebody watching me? It's like, no, you don't do that. You just walk over and you just do it like you're supposed to be there.
Yeah, I do a lot of geocaching with my kids, and kids are great for that because they don't have any self-consciousness about what they're doing. So I can just send them into an area and say, I think it's, from the hint and from the coordinates, I think it's got to be, on that light pole somewhere. And they'll just climb all over it like they should be, and nobody gives them a second look. So they're sort of like my first wave.
Right. That is perfect, Or in the case of Sydney, she has her dog with her, so she can kind of look like she's supposed to be, over in this weird area.
Mm-hmm. That definitely helps sometimes. I found it at like rest stops. Like if there's a cache way off at the end of the rest stop on the highway or whatever, I just take my dog. I'm just walking my dog, and so it's always helpful.
Now, for the most part, I think everyone, or for us that don't do a lot of caching in big cities, my impression is that they're all nanos. But what is the real experience, Brett, of your experience of finding other caches in New York City?
So a lot of them are. There's certainly going to be a higher ratio of nanos and bison tubes and sort of smaller caches. There's magnetic hide keys and things like that, and there's just going to be more of that the more urban your environment. It's just harder, especially in a city like New York, which gets a little jumpy about mysterious packages, and if you see something, say something, and so everyone has an interest in kind of keeping those types of situations from getting misunderstood. And the smaller the container in a place that's pretty urban, I think the less likely it is that you're gonna upset anyone.
Right.
And so because of that, in most, the more city parts of the area, especially with a lot of people walking around, you're just going to see smaller things, and that's fine. So there are a lot of nanos, there are a lot of bison tubes, there are a lot of magnetic hide keys. When you get to the more parky parts, when you're up at in Central Park, of course, and Inwood and the parks, you have more of an opportunity to hide some actual containers. You're still not going to see anything that's as large as like an ammo can or those are. I mean, every once in a while someone cleverly figures out a way to do it, but it's the exception. Most of the containers, even if they're not micros, are still on the smaller side, so that they can still be more or less unobtrusive and less likely to be found by accident, and if found, less likely to be intimidating. So one of the things we try to do, especially in New York, we try to encourage containers that have like plastic containers that are clear, so that if someone does come across it and they don't know what it is, they can see that inside it's pencil erasers and notebooks. It's not something that's mysterious. A lot of really good caching containers are things that are sort of, military-ish use, like ammo cans, right?
True.
So,
that's true.
And a lot of the containers that are in use are things that people pick up at like Army Navy supply stores and things like that. And those just don't work as well here, because if you do find it when you weren't looking for it, some of the labeling can be really alarming.
Right.
Encourage people to use containers that are going to not raise an alarm if people do stumble across it without looking for it.
Right. Yeah, makes perfect sense. I mean, in our world today, I mean, that's, kind of the norm now, is to try to not raise alarms. So, well, let's take a moment and let's look at. Let me screen share here, and we're going to kind of look at the map a little bit. And Brett, if you could kind of walk us through some of this. So, I'm not sure where we want to start, but one thing about New York City, of course, there's a lot of it, obviously, but what are you laughing at, Sydney?
It's just nothing. Continue.
No, yeah, there's a lot. We're going to talk about every cache tonight on this. No, I'm kidding. Because, like you said, there's so we all sort of, when we think New York City, we think of like
Manhattan.
We all kind of hit. Yeah, exactly, Sydney. We all have this in our head as far as what it looks like. Whereas there's a lot of places that are. I mean, it's big, and so you've got a lot of different types of areas. So I guess, Brett, what I want to kind of, without getting into too much specifics, but as far as parts of town or parts of the different boroughs and the different areas, do you find that well, there's several places. I mean, you have a lot of parks. I mean, that's clearly we forget the number of parks that are in the area. I mean, this one's in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
These, I guess, you potentially could put bigger ones, but then again, you've got more people that are they're not really going somewhere in the sense of, like, if you're over here on, say, 13th Street or whatever, usually people are getting somewhere, versus if they're in the park, they're sitting in the park and they're not, they're kind of, that's their destination. So they're sitting there. So it's kind of maybe harder to hide something here, because like you said, there's more people probably who are aware of their surroundings. Maybe, is that?
Yeah, and the thing is, even in a big park like this, that park, like Prospect Park, is a fantastic park. It's a great park, and it services a lot of people. There's a lot of people in Brooklyn who are, that's the closest, best kind of outdoor space available to them. So it's not as empty as you might sort of think it would be for a similar sized park somewhere else. Like there tends to be people all around. It's less dense than Central Park, because Central Park has a lot of tourists.
Sure.
That might not be coming to some of the parks in the other boroughs as often. But there's still a ton of people around. So, you can hide bigger things than you can in other parts of the city, but you're still probably going a little bit smaller than you would in other places.
Right. Makes sense. All right, let's go to another area. So are there areas of town or city, I should say, town? Not really a town, is it? Is there parts of New York City that geocaching.com has said you're not hiding anything here? I don't care what you say, you're not hiding it there. Is that?
Yeah, there are. So New York, obviously, there's a lot of sensitivities, right? So, and there's a lot of common sense things like, that are probably as applicable to New York as they are anywhere else. So not hiding caches outside of police stations and things like that, like not hiding caches on school grounds, not attaching things to federal mail, all that stuff that applies everywhere, that certainly applies just as much, if not more, to New York.
Sure.
The UN is in New York, and there's definitely there's kind of a black hole around where the UN is, because I think for obvious reasons that's not a place where we're trying to arouse too much suspicion.
Right.
There is a section of Central Park that's actually been closed off to caching. It was sort of a casualty of a poorly thought out vacation cache from way back when vacation caches were still implicitly allowed.
Okay.
Someone hit a cache in the Strawberry Fields section of the park, which is sort of near the Dakota with John Lennon. And they didn't maintain it very well. And then I think what happened was that section of the park got closed off for reseeding.
Okay.
And they put up a fence, but the cache was never disabled, which was probably because the people who placed it didn't live in New York. They had moved back to the West Coast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So instead of disabling it, sort of staying on top of it, it was still listed as active. And you know as well as I do, like sometimes finders are not so great about doing, what they should. And so a lot of people were hopping the fence to go find the cache. And
oh boy.
The Park Conservancy got really upset about it, and they said, "You guys are done. You can never hide another cache in this section of the park again."
Okay.
So I consider we feel very lucky that they didn't shut it down Central Park wide.
Right.
The fact that they did this section, it was kind of I don't want to say it was a warning shot. It was a communication to say, like, you guys need to be a little bit more respectful of what we're trying to do here as a park. We know that you guys are here. We're not shutting you down, but help us out here a little bit. Like this park was closed and nobody shut the cache down, and now we have people trampling all over this fresh seeded ground.
Right.
So since then, we've all as a community tried to be respectful of keeping those options alive.
Now you mentioned the New York Conservancy. Is I say that right?
Central
Park Conservancy. Do you when you're going to place a cache in Central Park, other than getting permission from geocaching.com, do you there's a process that you go through as far as contacting them to let them know, hey, I want to put one in this spot, or what is the procedure that you would go through?
For most of New York, it's a little bit New York as a city, and the Parks Department is, I think, generally aware of geocaching. They don't have an official geocaching policy, and the way that we've handled things as a community is that when parks workers have come across caches that they consider to be a problem for some reason or another, for example, there was a time a year ago there was a cache in the northern part of Central Park that was much larger than a typical cache.
Up this way.
It was in this area. It's not listed anymore, but it was a really big cache, and a park worker came across it, recognized it as a geocache, and contacted geocaching.com and said, you know what, this one's a little bit too much. Like we'd like to have this delisted.
Right.
And so geocaching.com got in touch with the cache owner. The cache owner was on it right away. The thing was shut down within 24 hours. And we considered that a victory of, just general communication. Like,
sure.
It's kind of evidence that we can play nice with you. And, if there's a problem, let us know. We'll take care of it. And it seems like everyone's gotten along pretty well as far as that goes.
Very cool. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna talk about really two caches tonight. Mostly, we're gonna talk about this one right here,
sure.
Or at least, I'm trying to think. I think before we talk about that one, since we're in the middle of just talking about geocaching in general in New York City, let's talk about this other one, and we'll spend the bulk of the time on the multicache, because I find it fascinating, incredibly fascinating. But you mentioned this one.
Yeah.
Snug as a bug in Central Park, which I found equally fascinating. Yeah. 480 favorites, which is fabulous. But the amount of times it's been found is probably gone up since, let's see, it was 11,501. Let me refresh.
Yeah. That's a lot of books.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So 11,501. We even talked about today. It was found 9 times. 1, 2,
times,
3,
yeah.
4, 5. So, like you said, it's a pretty good day today. It was a pretty good weather in New York City.
Yeah, it wasn't too hot, and so
a lot of people. And we talked about how you've gone through and you've put the states, and you've put the countries that people have found this thing in.
Yeah.
And then it's like you can put, and then this one has travel bugs in it. So
It looks like it has more than it does. It typically has 2 or 3 at a time.
I know those happen, but still, the fact that you could put a
Yeah.
travel bug in it is pretty cool. So, tell us a little bit about Snug as a Bug in Central Park.
Sure. So it was actually the first cache that we hid as a family. So it was a while ago. So we're talking
2007, yeah.
And so my oldest daughter was 6 at the time, and we had been geocaching together for a few months, and we thought, we'd found maybe 70 or 80 caches, and we thought it's about time for us to give something back and hide something. So there was a cache that was in about this general location in Central Park that had recently gotten disabled and then archived. And so we contacted geocaching.com to see if we could, unarchive it and take it over. And they said, no, if this is something you're interested in, we'd much rather you hide your own cache. We were like, okay, so great. So we came back out again to that area, and I looked around with my 6-year-old. She found a spot cache, and we didn't really think too much of it. It was just in location, and it was in a part of the park that was easy for us to walk to. It wasn't too far from her elementary school. And it, over time, as geocaching started growing, like it got more and more finders. And then when the iPhone came out, it just kind of everything changed. And all of a sudden it was getting multiple finds a day, and we were really scrambling to keep up with like logbooks and things like that. It's been a useful cache. I think it was, the numbers, I think, are a weird convergence of a bunch of different things that lead to cache velocity.
Right.
It's in a city that's visited by a lot of tourists. So that's a big part of it, because a lot of people come to New York, and sometimes people want to check off that state on their map. So they find the cache. So that's part of it. Like the caches I find that seem to get the highest velocity of finds tend to be in tourist cities. It's a cache that is big enough to hold a couple of travel bugs, and so if people have visited New York City and they want to drop one off, it's often the closest cache to them, to their hotel, especially if they're staying in Midtown. It's in Central Park, and so a lot of people figure that would be the place to go for geocaching, and it kind of is. Like a lot of the bigger non-nano, non-micro caches are in Central Park, so that kind of naturally draws people. And this wasn't something that was planned out, but we kind of figured it out later. It's the furthest south kind of regular sized or small container in the park. So if someone's staying in Midtown and they want to go drop off a travel bug, it's probably the closest one. Or if they just want to go find one cache, it's also pretty close. And it's not hard. It's designed to be easy for kids. So all those things kind of taken together wound up with this really weird mix of things that all point in the direction of a lot of finds in a short period of time. So yeah. So I have to run out there every couple of months and replace the logbook.
Do you have any like that, Sydney? You got to replace the logbook every
Not that often, no.
Yeah, I don't. We definitely don't have any around here that get found that often, but it's pretty amazing. So, and I don't know if anybody's seen it or not. We were talking about before the show about it was was it Jimmy Fallon, Brett, or Kimmel?
That was Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel, right? And Liev Schreiber, the actor, did some geocaching in New York City, and he talked about it on Kimmel. And so you can go see that if you go to YouTube. Not now, do it later because we're on the show right now. But tonight or tomorrow, whatever, go find that interview. But I find it fascinating because, again, I'm fascinated by caching in New York City. But his discussion about it made me think about about the whole process of what people are doing and something like that. An actor finding it. I wonder if we ever figured out if anybody of any kind of fame has found found that Snug as a Bug cache.
I'd be willing to bet that there are famous people geocaching that we just don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a name that is not Tom_Cruise, and they're they're out there finding stuff.
Right. So. It's pretty cool idea. So a interesting thought. But all right, Well, let's get into discussing the main cache tonight that we want to talk about.
Sure.
And this is the Bridges and Arches. And again, as I mentioned, it's in the book. So, and then there it is. Starts on page 63 of the book. So there it is down there. Bridges and Arches. And Sydney, you've actually got the coin, and you're going to tell us a little bit about your wild experience doing this cache.
Sure, absolutely. So I had wrangled. This was before the dog, so I had wrangled my boyfriend into taking me to New York City for my birthday, and little did he know that this cache was going to be one of the ones that I wanted to do. He had no idea what that entailed, but we got there on I think a Friday afternoon, and we started, walking around the park looking for some of the bridges, and it took us until Sunday to finish the cache. So it took almost 2 days.
2 days? I mean, come
Yeah.
on. I mean, it's just a cache. What's
No.
going on here?
There's how many waypoints are in this cache, Brett?
32.
32 waypoints.
Wait. 32.
That's right.
Everybody wrap your head around that for a minute. It's a 32 stage multi-cache.
That's right. And it's all in Central Park, obviously.
Walking distance.
Yeah, it's all walking. It's a lot of walking.
It's a lot of walking. In fact,
I think I did like 12 miles in maybe a day and a half during that weekend.
That was Susan's question, Brett. And well, you did it, Sydney. So do you guys think 12 miles is about accurate? If you were going to walk the whole thing, does that seem correct?
Yeah, that's what I tell people. Like, when people ask, I say prepare for about a 12-mile walk.
Okay. Now, if you want to cheat, in a sense, could you public transport part of it, I guess?
I don't think so. I don't think
Not really.
You can't? Okay. Darn. Okay.
There's not like in Central Park, there's not like buses that drive around. I mean, you could like rent a bicycle, and that might help.
Well, yeah, that's true, I guess, right?
So the bicycle thing is tricky because some people have rented bikes, but they found that it hinders them as often as it helps them, because there are sections of the park where you can't take bikes. So it's a lot of time walking the bike, and then that's not so efficient either. So
right. Okay. All right. Keep going, Sydney. Sorry.
Makes sense. So in essence, there's 32 bridges or arches that you have to find, and they're all really cool, like different designs and architectures and stuff. And Brett actually talks a little bit about each one on the cache page. So it's actually really interesting to go on there and read about, all the different bridges that they have here and how they got there and when they were built and things like that. But then each bridge kind of has some sort of number, obviously, that you're looking for. So that might be like, there's a tag on the side of the bridge for something or other. So he points those out to you, and that's how you find all these numbers, and then you do some math, which I messed up when I was in New York, and then you hopefully get the right answer, fingers crossed. And so it's a lot of walking, a lot of work, and if you mix up a number, like I think I did, and then you get to the end and you're working on the math, and yes, I finally found them all, and then you don't get the right answer.
Oh no!
So that was a little frustrating.
Now, did you end up finding it that trip, Sydney, or did you have to come back and do it?
I did. I believe I emailed Brett and I said, I have no idea which number I have wrong. Here's what I have. And he just said, here's the one you got wrong. Here's the right number. And so that was really helpful. Well, and then we got it.
That's awesome. Well, show the coin real quick, because there's a coin, and there it is. Very cool. Yes. Oh, I love it. That is awesome. Yeah. There it is, and it's got some of the bridges and arches on the back. It is a very cool coin. So let's kind of get back to the beginning of this thing. So Brett, how did you even think about creating? What was the genesis of the bridges and arches of Central Park?
So a lot of that came from. So when my kids were younger, we spent a lot of time in the park, and when we started geocaching, we definitely were doing a lot of that in the park. And my kids' school is actually right on Central Park West, so like across the street from Central Park. And because of that, they did a lot of Central Park centric sort of things for their curriculum. Like they spend an entire year studying the park, and the people who designed it, and what the what's in the park, and et cetera. And so they go on walks with park rangers, and they point out the different birds and animals and plants
Sure.
and things like that. Anyway, so from those conversations with my kids and their curriculum, I sort of discovered this really, to me, fascinating fact about the park, that all these bridges and arches that I was sort of vaguely aware existed from movies and TV shows and things like that, but they're all intentionally distinctively different. And I thought at the time, and I was looking for some kind of puzzle cache type ideas, and I thought bringing people on a tour to go check all these things out would actually be kind of a pretty cool cache idea. So I started just going on some field trips on my own out to the park, and just started like mapping things out. I bought some books. There's a few books that focused on the different bridges and things like that. So I kind of consumed everything I could and learned what I could about the history of them.
Right.
And became increasingly convinced that it would be kind of a fun idea for a cache. And then I started mapping it out, and the whole thing from conception until we actually got it listed was probably about 6 months from start to finish.
Okay.
But I'm glad we took the time, because I think it came out better than if we'd rushed it. So.
Oh yeah. It's it's on the list. 201 geocaches you got to find, and and the list is based on premium members giving it favorite points. And it's got 590 favorite points, and it's been found. Hang on, let me get to the bottom of the page, because your cache description's awesome too. By the way, I know had to take some effort to get all that.
Yeah, that took a while.
That took a while to probably put all that in there, but let's see. It has been found 1,077 times, which is incredible. Now,
a lot of hours.
Yeah. So let me jump in. Let me read you a little bit about some of the things I found, and I think I'm right on all these, because we talked about this before the show. But it received 3 2008 awards from the Metro New York Geocaching Society: Best Themed Cache, Nicest Scenery, which you can understand that just by looking at the pictures. Best Hike, yeah, I would say that's a hike.
Certainly.
And yeah, Sydney can tell you, yeah. And Most Humbling of All, Cache of the Year. So you were also Geocache of the what do you call that? Geocache of the Month.
Yeah, Groundspeed picked it up.
Cache of the Week. I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is awesome. So yeah, that was in February of 2015. You were named Cache of the Week by geocaching.com, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So we will put the blog entry in the show notes, so you can go look for it. But if you want to go to the geocaching blog and search for the Central Park, and you'll find it. So, you did all the work, you get it all done, and one of the things you mentioned, and we're trying to figure out where the quote came from, because I put a quote in the book, but you wrote this, and then you said, when you publish a cache, you're kind of asking people to trust you with their time. And if your cache takes several hours, it just felt like a lot of responsibility. I was mostly hoping that when people go to the end, they wouldn't feel irritated about all the time they invested writing down numbers and making calculations, and otherwise jumping through all the hoops they've been jumped through all day. Then after it was published and the logs finally started coming in, a tremendous sense of relief. So what was the experience of that? You publish it, you're like, okay, is somebody going to find this thing or what? So,
yeah, I mean, it took a long time to plan out and to publish. I mean, it was sort of months, and I was concerned about how long it was going to take people. I did 3 dry runs before we finally pushed the publish button, and each one took me between like 4.5 and 6 hours, and that was knowing where everything was. So anyone who was looking for the cache that was actually hunting for the different things, presumably it might take them even a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted it to be a situation that at the end of it, I didn't want people to feel like they had done 6 hours of busy work.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to sort of feel like they had actually had like a nice day at the park, or if they split it up, a nice couple of days.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, I was a little bit worried about it. I wasn't sure exactly how it would be received, but it seems like people have enjoyed it, and I think that most of that credit goes to the park itself. I mean, it's I kind of pointed people to a few different places to go see, but if there wasn't something to see there wouldn't have been anything to write about. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I guess we should point out is that there's not a container at all 32. You're just finding the coordinates, correct?
Yeah, no, that's right. At each of the 32 stages, you're just looking for some information. It sort of brings you to a bridge. The cache description has a little bit of a story about how that bridge came to be or what the history of it is. Then there's some directions to find, a number that's somewhere around the bridge. But yeah, there's no physical containers. In fact, that was the first thing that the Groundspeak reviewer, pointed out when I first submitted the cache. Is they were like, "Are you going to be able to maintain 32, individual
plus final?"
No, don't worry about it. This is nothing physical. There's only one physical container, and it's at the very end. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Good.
I was just going to say that the other thing that was in designing a cache, one of the things that took a little bit of time at the beginning was making sure that each of the stages had 2 independent ways to get the same number.
Interesting.
Because I wanted there to be, it was for 2 reasons. One, I wanted people to, if part of the bridge was maybe blocked off for construction or something, I wanted people to have a natural second way to get that information. So that, I mean, if just one random thing happened in one of the 32 stages, they wouldn't be dead in the water.
Right.
And I also wanted to give people a way to just do a natural error check, so that if they go write down the number off the sign and it's a 2, but maybe they wrote down a 3 by mistake, then when they go get the error check number, if they see that one is a 2 and it doesn't match with what they wrote down for the other one, then they've got an opportunity to go back and make sure that they've got the right number written down. So the error checks really cut down, I think, a lot of the problems that people might otherwise have, because that's a lot of data, and the chance that you're going to write down every single number exactly right every single time there's some chance that something goes wrong. But having a chance to back up each number cut that down a lot. So. No,
it's a great. You really thought through that really well, Brett. Okay, so go back to Sydney. So in overall, what was your thought and planning and experience? Just because you'd been to New York City before, right? I mean,
I had been, but I hadn't been to Central Park before.
Okay, so you're coming in sort of fresh in that sense. But what was the experience of going through all these parts of Central Park? Was it what was the experience of doing all that? What was your thoughts about? Because you'd been caching for a while before you did this one, right?
Less than a year.
Okay, less than
like
a year.
6 months or so, I think.
Okay.
So it was like I think the biggest undertaking I ever took in my first year of caching or so. Thinking about it now, I would have done it totally different. I didn't bring pen and paper, so I was keeping track of all the numbers on my phone, and I wasn't like writing down which waypoints I had done, so I was kind of just guessing, like, okay, we went over here, right? We got this one, just like looking at the map. So if you are going to do it, I would suggest actually bringing like maybe a printout of the map so you could like cross them off as you do them, and make sure you bring a pen and paper to write down the numbers and do the math at the end. But it was just, Central Park is so crazy and yet so like peaceful at the same time, because I mean, it's this giant park, and some people really don't realize how big Central Park is.
Right.
It's like you can't even see the buildings around you most of the time when you're in the park, which is really amazing. And there's like horse and buggies going around, so it's got this kind of old-timey feel. And there's a lot of cool architecture and stuff outside of the bridges and everything too. So that was something like really surreal feeling, like you're in this giant city and yet you don't feel like you're in a huge city with millions of people living there.
Right. Because you kind of get in the middle of Central Park and you're like, it's like you said, it's a kind of whole. I mean, Brett, is there? I mean, there's a zoo and there's a whole zoo in Central Park. There's fairly large lakes in.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different bodies of water. There's a zoo. There's a carousel. There's an ice rink. There's a bunch of stuff going on there. The something else that's interesting. The north half of the park is actually very different from the southern half of the park. The southern half of the park is very touristy and pretty dense with people that are kind of walking around. The northern half of the park is much more sort of seemingly wild. It's not. I mean, the whole park is landscape, so none of it is like old growth forest or anything. But it's definitely more foresty in the north, and much more like you really could be up there and not have any idea that you're in a city.
Wow.
So it's a pretty different feel. The way that we've laid out the waypoints, the first part of it takes people through the north part of the park, which is a little bit slower going, and it's kind of a nicer walk, especially if it's your first experience in Central Park. And then as the day goes on, you start working your way south, and the waypoints get closer together, and you start, kind of finishing it up a lot more quickly. So
okay, yeah, that was what I was kind of wondering is you kind of go ahead and lay it out for cachers. You kind of suggest that they kind of do them in the order that you've put them on the cache description.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it was a couple of reasons. One, I just figured me having a little bit more experience with the park, I'd probably be able to lay out a path that's the most efficient to keep it to 12 miles instead of 16 or whatever.
Right.
And then on top of that, we tried to start people in the north and have them work their way south because the cache does take a long time. If you try to bang it out all in one day, it can be 6 hours or so. And if you're also trying to clear the park of other caches, that can go to 8 or 9 hours. So the northern part of the park is more isolated, and it's at night, it's darker and not, quite as, I don't want to say it's unsafe. It's just a little spookier.
Okay.
And so I kind of wanted to lay it out so that as the day goes on, if someone is going to get caught as the sun sets, that they're sort of in the southern part of the park that has a lot more artificial lighting and a lot more people around.
Yeah.
That's why we kind of tried to start people from the north and had them work their way south.
Right. I mean, that's great thought on that. So on the without we can give away the final, but let's talk a little bit about the final.
Sure.
And again, if I step on something, don't answer. Is it fairly large on the final, or can we talk about the size?
Yeah, I mean, talk about it. Yeah, it's an old school, like from like 10 years ago, ground speak fake rock.
Okay.
It's bigger than the ones that they sell now. It's actually got enough room in there for a couple of travel bugs and things like that.
Okay.
It's one of the only kinds of containers that has much of a shot of escaping kind of routine park maintenance. At a glance, it does look like a rock as opposed to a Tupperware container or something else, a little bit more whatever.
That was smart.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. I had gone with initially it was a fake log, but we had some trouble with the location that we had. So when we moved the final, when we nudged the final over, a few hundred feet, we changed the container, and it's been basically the same container ever since.
Okay, very cool. Now, at what point did you decide that you wanted to do a coin for this?
That was pretty early. I think once I realized how long the cache was going to take, that's about when I thought that, maybe there's something that we should do to sort of commemorate or reciprocate the amount of time that people basically donated to this cache and kind of trusted us with their time. And so I was also thinking that it might be a way, because it is such a big time investment, that at the time I was thinking that might be one of the only ways I can get anyone to do the cache is if I, is if I, basically bribe them.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I now recognize that, that although I think people do dig the coin, I don't think that there's a long list of people that wouldn't have done it if not for the coin. I think the coin has been nice, but I don't think it's the driving force behind why people have enjoyed the cache. But that is, I was thinking, it's like, maybe it would be a nice memento. It's a little something in exchange for, half a day of your life. So, I talked to my brother about it. My brother's very artistic. He's much more talented and skilled as far as that stuff goes. And so I sketched out the general idea of what I wanted, and he came back with this really amazing design. And we got some coins printed up. And yeah, they've been, I try to run out there about once a week with my son, and we restock it with coins. And we've never had a problem with people stealing them. We've never had a problem with
wow.
going back and taking them. Because, like you said, like 1,000 people have found it.
Yeah.
I've never had an issue with anyone going back and clearing it out or anything. Everyone's been super cool.
Oh, wow. I didn't, that's something I'd never thought about. I figured you mailed them to people, but.
I do sometimes.
If people have to, like if they're not in town or something, they'll send you a note and say, I had to leave. Okay. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
But that's awesome.
Yeah. No, it works out. I still do mail them occasionally, because sometimes, if the cash runs out, if it's a busy week and I don't get there, in time to restock, then sometimes I mail it out. And I actually ran out of coins entirely a few weeks ago. And so I've got some on back order. So everyone who's found the cache for the last couple of months, I've got to know. I've been exchanging emails with them, and I get their address, and as soon as they arrive, I'll pop them back out in the mail.
Okay. Very cool. Now, Sydney, when you did this, did you A, know anything about geocoins at the time, and B, did you have any idea? Did you have yours mailed to you, or did you actually find a coin in the cache?
Right. So I think I knew about geocoins, but I wasn't like big. I didn't have a huge collection of them at that time, like I do now. But that I was excited to see that I was gonna get something pretty nifty out of finding this cache. And actually, when I found it, the cache was out. They didn't have any. And I was emailing back and forth with Brett, and he was saying, I'm going out there tomorrow. Are you still going to be in town? And I said, I don't know or not. So we ended up, leaving town before he got out there. So he was nice enough to mail our coins out to us.
That's cool.
I try to make sure that they're in there, because it's just so much more cinematic.
Yeah.
Than actually have it be there. Like, it's just more satisfying. Like, I could mail it and you would still get it, and that's great. But it's kind of more fun. You've been doing it all day long. It's kind of more fun to open it at the end and actually have the thing in there. So I try to get them out there. I just don't always win the race.
That's okay though. That's pretty cool. So like right now, or let's say, well, even right now, because we've had people. Let me take a quick look, because it's a good question. I think we had somebody find it. Get to the end of the page. Okay, last person to find it was back in end of June, so not too long ago. So as far as the different arches, how often have you had somebody mention to you, it's like, this thing's shut down as far as I can't get anywhere near this particular arch or this particular bridge? Does that happen often, or is it, even though you've put the two, you got your fail-safe in place, is there times when you flat out, there's no way you can ever finish this kind of thing, and you have to come back, people come back and do it later kind of thing? Or
So yeah, that happens. That's a great question. That happens. I do try to pick an error check that's at least some way, independent of the other variable. Like I don't try to have the error check be on the same, license tag.
Right.
I don't say it's the first digit or the last digit, because, then you've got some correlation risk. But it does happen. There are times when you can't get anywhere near it because the entire area has been closed off for construction or something. So there's a couple of things about that. One, it's very, very helpful when people email me that stuff. because then I can, sort of take steps to sort of correct it. I can't go out and like pick another variable, but what I can do, when I've done in the past, is edited the cache page to say, hey, it looks like this bridge is out of commission for the next 6 months. So in the meantime, this variable equals 5, and it's just a freebie.
Right.
You just get it.
Right.
The other thing is that, if people get in touch with me and there's a problem like that, any problems just writing back and saying, okay, that one is this. Like, you can't get there, that's fine. That's, that equals 6.
Right.
I've never had a problem or suspicion that anyone's, hacking the cache by, getting free answers or anything. I generally trust that people are, putting the work in. If people get in touch with me ahead of time, if someone knows that they're going to go get this cache ahead of time, they know that they're going to come up, it's Monday, and they know that they're going to be there in the weekend, and they're going to give it a shot. I would encourage them to get in touch with me, because I will then send you my cell phone number. And if there is a problem in the field, you can text me and I'll text you back. That actually also comes in handy too, when people have finished the cache, it's not uncommon for people to get one wrong, but they don't know which one it is. All they know is that the number's just coming out wrong. And the idea of going back and having to check each of 32 stages is the kind of thing at the end of a long day you might imagine would make you a little teary-eyed. So I just tell people, hey, if that ever happens to you, text me your list or take a photo of what you've written down. I carry a card in my wallet that has all the variables on it. So It just takes me 2 seconds wherever I am. I can just pop it out and I can look and say, oh, it's this one. You had 3, it's actually 4. I think that's your only problem.
Right. Sydney?
So get in touch with me. You're going to do it. Get in touch with me ahead of time.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So yeah. Go ahead, Sydney. I got some other questions, but I've been hogging this whole thing. So
it's funny that he said that, because that was totally me. Like, it was like the end of the day on Saturday, and I was like, okay, we got them all, and I'm sitting there and doing the math on my little scrap of paper, and I was like, it's just not working out. I'm so frustrated. I don't want to go back and look at all these bridges again. I'm so sick of walking. And so I had emailed Brett and said, I have no idea which one is wrong. Can you please help me? And we took a break. We got some dinner nearby, and then he emailed me back, and I was like, okay. Oh, I got it. This is so, I was so thankful. And we ran over there pretty much right away. And so that's really, really helpful, because I was not about to go back around to 32 places in the park.
And Glenn's still with you, Sydney. That's
I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
That's amazing in itself. No, I'm kidding.
I wonder if I hadn't sent those numbers over, how things would be different today.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I would have done.
Would she still be geocaching, and then would she be invited to be a co-host on Geocache Talk? And would she? In
an alternate universe.
In an alternate universe, she's all she's doing is Pokemon Go, and she's on some other show.
I'm still in Central Park, trying to figure out the answers.
She's still there, lost and dazed and confused. Well, one thing also that's I've found interesting, and I'm sure Brett, you find this interesting, is to go back and read some of because the cache logs. Well, number one is, since the container is not it's not like Project Ape or something where people can write books of information when they go to. But I'm thinking about the one in Brazil, but people have spent a good amount of time writing cache logs on the page, and it's interesting. And I'm sure you found some really cool ones of people writing really kind of cool cache logs about their experience on the cache page.
Yeah, the logs have been great. The logs are just super fun to go through and read, and there've been times when people have cached as a pair, and they've said, like, gosh, there's two of us, it's like, are you sure you want to send 2 coins? Like, that seems like a lot. And my response has always been like, look, if you guys like are legit loving the cache and you leave 2 logs, I don't really have a problem with it. It's, because like for me, reading that people enjoyed it, it's kind of satisfying. And it's there's the coin that's left in the cache container is actually, it's not a trackable coin. It's a geo coin, but it's not trackable. But anyone who finds the cache can get trackable versions of the same coin if they make donations to the Central Park Conservancy.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So I tell, and anyone who reaches out, there's a little note on the coin that says, if you're interested in this, just let me know. And anyone who reaches out, I sort of explain to them, sort of how it works. I was like, I don't ask for proof. I just say, like, if you found the cache and you tell me you donated to the Central Park Conservancy, just let me know and I'll send a couple coins out to you. So over time, the people who've done that, like, it's raised a lot of money for the park.
That's awesome.
Thousands of dollars over the years. And so the logs are a kind of advertisement to get people, like, people look at it and they read these logs and they think, oh, that cache looks like it's enjoyable. It looks like people are having a good time. Maybe that's a cache I'll do too. And if they do it and they enjoy it and they decide that they want to get a trackable version of the coin, then that's more money for the Conservancy, and it kind of keeps up the park, and the whole thing just kind of winds up working out. So,
oh, that is wonderful. Yeah. It's neat to go through. I mean, a lot of people are making this as I'm kind of looking through different ones, and something we all kind of have, which is, if there's a cache that we want to find and it's a quality like this, or it's an experience that we want to have, that they're making it their 2000th or whatever, cache milestone that they're wanting to do, they're kind of making this sort of a destination cache, which I think is wonderful.
It's pretty cool.
And being New York City, are you finding that you've got, from what I can tell, I mean, from just, you go through them, you can see a lot of international people are finding this because, again, people travel, people travel New York City from all over the world. And so, one that was recent was somebody was from New Zealand and came all the way.
It's a tough cache. I'm always super impressed and, kind of, honored by people who are visiting from overseas and choose this to be one of the caches that they do, because I can't imagine they're here for that long. And this is a cache that takes most of a day. So, you're putting a lot of other things, a lot of other great things in the city on hold, to just go do this one thing and to get this one smiley. And so, it's pretty neat. And, and I'm usually, pretty touched by the logs that people leave. And it seems like, if it seems like they've enjoyed themselves, and whatever the opportunity cost of their time was, whatever Broadway show they didn't get to see, I'm hoping that it wound up being worth it. So,
right. That's awesome. Now, something we let people know, we kind of talked about, because Brett's got some other cool stuff that we want to talk about, especially some puzzle caches that you've worked with, Child of Adam. If people are familiar with, where's my book? It's around here somewhere. I got the book. I can't. It's not within reach, but the How to Puzzle Cache book by Cully Long is really cool, and we're going to, for time purposes, we're going to keep all that. And Brett, if you would you be willing to come back on the show at some time, a little bit down the road, and we can talk about your puzzle caches in the area as well?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think that'd be great. I'd love to. I could talk for an hour about puzzle caching, so it seems to work with your format.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, that fits perfectly into our 1 hour show for another day. So we're going to keep that, and so everybody, stay tuned in the future. We're going to get Brett scheduled, hopefully before the end of the year. I'd like to have you on again. And we talk about, because puzzle caches are also, we have a mix. People are big fans of puzzle caches. Some people not so much. I try to do some. I'm not as good, and I struggle with it. Sydney's an expert, so no, she's shaking her head. No way. But I think I could speak for her too. Well, she can speak for herself, but I find them kind of fascinating when they're done really well.
I agree. I think that's important. I think that a good puzzle cache is, almost artistic. I think if
Mm-hmm.
it's got like an elegance to it,
Right.
that can make an enjoyable experience. Without going into too much, of a line about it, I think that as long as a puzzle is not being made difficult just for the point of making it difficult, I think it can be a pretty good experience.
Right. Right. No, that's really good, and yeah, that'll be fascinating to hear about your puzzle caches. But just wrapping this up, I mean, it's I I really appreciate what you've done with this cache. I know a lot of people I speak for are just really appreciative of what you've done to create something cool. Gives people, like you said, although Sydney was frustrated by it. Overall, Sydney, did you have a good time doing this?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I just went back and found my log, and I'm just
Oh,
rereading it. And
yeah. Read it, please. Please give us. Please, it's story time with Shermanator
okay,
18. Go ahead.
it's okay. It's funny that I actually found this on my birthday, so that was an interesting point that I kind of forgot. But it says, well, what an adventure. McDougan's, which is my boyfriend, and I came to New York City for the weekend to celebrate my birthday. And this cache was high on our list. We started yesterday by getting the northernmost bridges and arches, as Brett recommends. We visited the 9/11 Memorial Museum and then headed back to Central Park. Finding all 32 of these bridges and arches really put a strain on us, both mentally and physically. My feet might just fall off after this. A very well designed and set up cache. Thanks for the history lesson, and a big thanks for all the help with verifying our answers. If I could give you 5 favorite points, I definitely would.
That's awesome. Very good. All right. So, final thoughts from you two on bridges and arches.
Yeah, I mean, if I could throw out some advice for people who
Yeah.
want to tackle this, I
Oh,
would
absolutely.
say, if you're in town for more than a day, consider breaking it up, because I think it can be done in a day, but by the end of it, most people, it's about 6 hours, and it can be pretty exhausting, and sometimes it's almost so fatiguing at that point that the people aren't maybe as well off as they would be if they kind of did 3 hours on a Saturday and 3 hours on a Sunday and kind of wrapped it up like that. So if you have the luxury of having the extra time, I would suggest breaking it up. Bring water. Use the error checks. It takes an extra minute or two per waypoint, but I think it's totally worth it in the long run because the chances that you'll get something wrong is going to be a lot lower. And if you know ahead of time you're going to come out and do it, get in touch with me. And give me a chance to, make a connection with you through email so I can give you my cell number. And then if there's a problem from the field, you can text me and we can hopefully get it wrapped up without you, having to go back home without connecting on the final. So
yeah, one thing we kind of messed up. We should tell people at the beginning, but they're going to hear it at the end, which is the GC code is
oh yeah
is 17 MX1. So it's pretty easy to remember. 17 MX1 is the GC code. We should mention that at the beginning, but that's okay. People can look it up. They're geocachers. Let them hunt for it.
Right.
You showed it on the map.
Yeah, there you go.
That's good enough.
Yeah, there you go. But and then your GC handle is Addison BR. B is like Brett, like BR. So
you got it.
And so look for his. If you want to, if you're in the area, you want to do some puzzle caches before we have him on again, do go for it, or wait till after the show. And Sydney, what are some of your last thoughts on this? I caught you a good time.
You caught me right as I was drinking some water.
See, I caught you. Gotcha.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Brett said, that if you're going to go, definitely break it up into 2 or 3 days. That's what we did. We split it up and we did some other sightseeing things in the city as well, but we were still really tired after those 2 days. And we didn't really plan it out very well either. So I would, as I said earlier, definitely bring maybe a printout of your of your map with all your waypoints and a sheet to write everything down. And it's just a really great adventure. Like I said, you don't feel like you're in such a big city when you're in Central Park. It's just really crazy to think about.
It's awesome.
Thank you.
Very cool. Well, coming up on the show next week, we're going to have on Nick Hubbard, our buddy from Cachly. We're going to talk about the Cachly Update 3.0 and all that entailed and what we're now getting on our new updates for that. Week after that, we're going to do a show called about inner caches and mob caches with a person, Chilihead. Sydney, I don't know, tell us real briefly about, because do you know Chilihead, or you know who Chilihead is?
Yep, he's from Rochester, and he developed basically a website that you connect to on your phone that recognize your GPS location, and he has a couple different ways of doing that to make these special geocaches.
Right. Very cool. So we're going to have him on in a couple weeks. And then in 3 weeks, we're going to have on some guy, Chris of the Northwest. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him. He's on some other show somewhere. I don't know what show he's on. But anyway. No,
Doesn't matter.
I'm just kidding. Chris Umfenauer will be on the show. We're going to talk about some can't miss caches up in the Northwest. Obviously, he's up there. But shameless plug for Geo Gearheads and for Caching in the Northwest, the two shows he's on. So anyway, so Chris will be on in 3 weeks. So well, that's it, folks. We hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Please email us your comments at geocachetalk@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at geocachetalk or at Gary Slinkard, one word. Or for Jesse, who's not with us tonight, but with us in spirit, his is at Memphis_Mafia. Sydney's is at ShermanatorGC, and Facebook at facebook.com/geocachetalk. Show can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, as well as the Geocache Talk website. Don't forget to click the subscribe button below so that you can see and hear the show on a weekly basis. Until next week, don't just talk about geocaching. Experience probably the greatest multicache you'll ever experience. And I'm serious. This is incredible. Go to New York City and go do this multicache. Plan ahead, like they said, but plan ahead and then go geocaching. Good night, everybody.
Good night.